One of my favorite side activities in life is slapping people in the face that do not agree that Pokemon Emerald is the peak of Pokemon. Especially at the time period it came out, Game Freak was firing on all cylinders, pumping out quality video games for snot-noses like me. But it's been a while since I've revisited Gen 3 proper, at least an entire decade, and I used to play these games religiously. Every Sunday I was grinding my pocket demons and spreading the word of evolution, while my friends were literally just suffering in Sunday school every week. Poor suckers. But my main objective this playthrough is to see how Emerald holds up, as well as reflect on Generation 3 as a whole. Is this game actually as goated as we remember it, or is the release of more polished games like ORAS ruined its reputation? Spoiler, my opinion on this game's story has completely changed since I last played it, and I've had a long time to think about this. Emerald is almost 20 years old and ORAS is almost 10. If you've been here since the beginning of Pokemania, damn, we're getting a little old, guys. But I want to discuss everything I can think of throughout this video, from battling, the story, and the themes, to the visuals, and even some little nostalgic story time from when I first played Generation 3, as I would consider myself a hardcore Gen 3er. And if at any point it does seem like I am biased or wearing those fancy rose-tinted glasses, yeah, I am. Glasses are so tinted they're looking mighty ruby at this point. And Generation 3 was personally where I really dove into the series proper, as before this, I was just too dumb and young to even get past the first gym leaders in Gen 1 and 2. Honestly, this was my first real foray to gaming in general outside of things like Mario Kart. And over the years, Gen 3 has withstood the onslaught of other generations and reigned supreme as my favorite generation. But sometimes I do find myself only thinking of Ruby and Sapphire and not Emerald, which I kind of know conceptually that Emerald's supposed to be the best, but in the end of the day, I really hope this repeat playthrough will change that. So let us dive into this chunky and yet somewhat divisive game and see how it holds up in 2024 and beyond. So where do we start this journey other than the beginning? One of the most iconic moments in gaming, one of the best walkout moments of all time, you start up your adventure in a moving van. I wonder if this is common in Hoenn. Look, to me, this shit is iconic and I love it, but yeah, it brings up a lot of questions about this poor child's upbringing. Other than this weird intro, the game starts off pretty normal for a Pokemon game. You pick out your starter, I chose Mudkip, dude's a tank, and I just gotta say something about these starters that even the heavens above may judge me for, but god damn it, I gotta say it. I think this is the best trio of starters of all time. I always have a hard time choosing. So yeah, come at me. I watched Pokemon the movie without crying. I can take it. In this opening hour or so, that you also learn that you're kind of also just a dirty little nepo baby, as your father, Norman, is a big shot gym leader. And then of course you start meeting the cast of important characters like the bumbling Professor Birch and your rival who seeks to embarrass you in your first Pokemon battle. After being back in this game for just a little while, one thing became immediately apparent. This game is downright beautiful. I just love Gen 3 sprite work so much. When you look at it, there's just so much detail. Even the UI in this game is quite a standout, and maybe an overlooked aspect of this game. It's quick and responsive, everything's pretty distinct and clear, and I rarely found myself misclicking things. It is a complete overhaul in my opinion over the Game Boy games, which can be a little bit of a mess to navigate, especially going back to them. Also looking back, I think there's a direct line from this game to now for my appreciation of good sprite work. I think there's a reason why people making ROM hacks and fan games always go back to this art style. It's so good, and I can clearly imagine many moments in this game in great detail. But there's so many tiny details that also make everything look so appealing, like the bouncing vegetation or the literal reflection of your sprite every time you pass some water. And dang, the water, dude. For a GBA game, this water looks great, which is good because there's a lot of it. And one of my favorite visual effects in this game is that little poof of ash every time you run through the gray grass that turns green around Fall Arbor Town. Look, I know this isn't mind-boggling, but back in the day, I remember I would just run back and forth, collecting up ash and just having a blast. And it's so simplistic, but I was a simple kid and I had very few friends. And every town in this game has its own distinct visual presence that makes it feel very unique. These games also originally came out at a unique time for me. I can see how a little version of me got very attached to these sprites and story. It is very relatable, and much like Brendan/May, I was going through my own journey, and I think it's something any kid that has moved around a bit can relate to. There was also a cool red lobster monster on the front, and that's just badass. The last thing I appreciate in the early game is just how there isn't really too many tutorials. Tutorials have really plagued some of the later games, especially like the 3DS ones, and here it's not really as big of a pain for someone who knows what's going on. But I'm gonna stop myself right there, because while I appreciate all these things, I kind of already knew a lot of this already. And now I kind of wanted to dive into some of the things I found a little different. And to start, we need to talk about the story, or more specifically, the villain arc. Pokemon games are all about exploring the world and your personal journey along the way. So let's talk a little bit about the story that drives us through this new region. This game is one half your adventure attaining fame and defeating the gym leaders, and another half taking down a villainous syndicate. But unfortunately for this little hero, they gotta take down two baddies this time, Team Aqua and Team Magma. Over the years, I've heard many say this game's story is a little mediocre and that Team Aqua and Magma are boring villains. But when I played this game as a kid, I remember really loving it and all the characters I met along the way, but my main focus was still just on leveling up my Pokemon and destroying every man, woman, and child that dared pop an exclamation mark above their head. When I last played this game about 10 years ago as an older kid, I remember thinking it was a story about two delusional villain teams with their petty squabbles of world domination with a little bit of environmentalism. But this time, I think I've been able to put it together just a little bit better. In Emerald, getting to interact with two villainous organizations with opposing goals of expanding the sea and land is one of this game's highlights and makes it a very unique game in the franchise. This is something that Ruby and Sapphire don't really convey that well, but Emerald does a much more acceptable job, and I think this is what really differentiates itself from the other two. What is not unique though is this poor little kid's the only one that can defeat them, and I would really hate to be this kid's therapist when they have to unpack all of that trauma. In Emerald, you get to talk more with both sides, and that makes this story function almost more as baby's first political drama, blaring trumpets included, two opposing sides with strong ideals and unwavering convictions going head to head. These are led by Maxie, the faux intellectual leader of Team Magma, ready to make his debut on a podcast to show it's a good idea to shoot rocket fuel into a volcano and make it explode. Nothing could ever go wrong with that, right? And his counterpart, Alpha Male Archie, the leader of Team Aqua and the well-known Simp Destroyer. I know they're not like referencing the modern version of what simp means in here, but like I don't know, I just found it really funny that it was in here, and it kind of just doesn't hold up because it's completely different. I'm pretty sure he just means like simpleton. Both of whom you battle and follow around through most of the game. However, these strong convictions catch up to both organizations, and unlike the real world where evil narcissists don't have a moment of reflection, here Archie and Maxie do, and realize that they have taken everything just too far, which is where we enlist the assistance of our lean green, mean, flying machine, Rayquaza, who stars in one of the most badass cutscenes in the entirety of Pokemon history. Imagine being a little 8-year-old and seeing this shit for the first time. It's no wonder that Rayquaza is one of the most popular legendaries of all time. I also just love how Rayquaza is depicted as this ultra ancient sky daddy from above who's watching the earth and only intervenes when the kids are fighting. But this is something that Emerald does very well, and I love how it depicts all these characters, and it's the first time they seem to really attempt something that was just a bit more cinematic in a Pokemon game, whether it's depicting Rayquaza and Steven Stone as the unequivocal badasses of the region, or Wally, the sickly child you can one-shot to a formidable trainer in Victory Road. Overall, I did appreciate this whole plotline a lot more than the first time I played this, and while there are other games that have done the whole we need to protect nature better, I don't think this is a bad story. I do really like what they're trying to convey with this conflict, trying to teach kids about real-world conflicts with two opposing sides that have such a hard time seeing the other, so they end up having this stalemate where nothing changes or it keeps going on until something catastrophically goes wrong. Especially in the case of environmental issues, where I personally think it's everyone's best effort to work together to make our home a better place. And although, even as I say that, I know there's probably someone watching who disagrees, but it's just unfortunate that all this time, this whole story really fell on deaf ears for myself, and I'm guessing several others out there, but there's still more to this game, so let's move on. Anyways, these games are still RPGs, and I've always appreciated how these older Pokemon games allow you to create your own epic storyline as you hop from gym to gym, filled with trials and tribulations along the way, storming the hideouts with your team of badasses, uncovering the world's secrets, and narrowly making it back to Nurse Joy to heal your Pokemon. This playthrough in particular was a really memorable experience for me, and I do love how even in my head, every time I journey back into one of these games, most of my playthroughs are pretty distinct and memorable. I really love the team I built for this one, and I'm really going to miss these little guys that have brought me glory, although it does kind of bring me back to another complaint. You see, most of this game is pretty damn easy, at least for a certified Pokepro like me. So early on choosing Mudkip, I knew it'd make the game a little easier, and yeah, dude definitely kind of sweeps a good portion of the gym. Mr. Dirtkip over here basically one-shots the entirety of Roxanne. Barley is a cakewalk if you have a little Talo named Burb. You can even bury Watson with Mud Slap thanks to Marshtomp at this time, and Flannery is a complete joke. But after this, I did develop quite a nice team, but also no moves. Okay, complaint incoming. The move pulls is somewhat of another unsuspected problem I had with this game, as they kind of just suck across the board. It was enough of a problem that my cousin, hi cousin, we were both discussing this a bit when we both realized that we were playing this game at the exact same time. And for example, there are Pokemon like Lochad, the Lotad. This dude isn't slated to learn Mega Drain until level 43. Level 40 fucking 3. And that's if you keep him as a Lotad. If you evolve him into Lombre, he doesn't even learn this shit, and honestly for most of the game. And if it wasn't for some girl giving him access to Giga Drain, I don't even know if he would have had a good grass move option. He also has a lack of water moves to this point, and that makes Waterfall frankly the best option for this little guy. And stuff like this is pretty common across the board. I think when I was a kid, I didn't think too much about this stuff, and it was before the idea of HM slavery had entered my brain. So all HMs were spread across my team's active moves. But now it's really an issue going back to this game. It doesn't ruin it, but I do think you have to be aware of this if you do go back and play this again. You should probably check what moves are available by level up before you commit to adding them to your team. But okay, that's it for this rant. Let's continue. There are a couple other cool things and features that this game has that every other Pokemon game should honestly have, and one of those is the ability to rematch trainers from the beginning of the game. This is just a really nice quality of life feature that makes the Pokénav very useful. Battles also feel quite a bit more dynamic this time around, at least compared to in the past, and the intro of double battles is a welcome shakeup to the formula, with some of the best encounters in the entire game being double battles. Some of my favorite moments in Pokemon games, especially even after this, are when you team up with the resident cool guy or girl of the region and fight some evil guy off. And those moments wouldn't be possible without Gen 3, and I think even Emerald did a better job of using double battles to its advantage. So now let's pedal back a little bit really quick, because we're halfway through. We've beaten Flannery on this slight journey, and the beginning of this game has been pretty linear. However, that changes around here. In fact, I found a quote from the man himself, Masuda, in a volume 84 of Nintendo Dream magazine, where on the topic of the game's linearity, he said, quote, "Waville and Lilycove are kind of tricky to understand. We wanted to add in an element conceptually where it's like a parent letting go of their child's hand and saying, now go wherever you want." And after reading this, I felt so vindicated. When I played this game as a kid, I remember beating Norman and honestly feeling so lost on what to do next. I probably wandered around for several days before I had a friend help me realize that you need to give a Pokemon Surf and move east, which was my main issue, because at this point I didn't even have a Pokemon that could learn Surf. So if it wasn't for my friend's help, I would have never finished Ruby back in the day. And then when you do eventually surf across the way, you are immediately hit with branching paths and maze-like tall grass areas. So I do think this game strikes a good balance between openness and shoving you down a linear corridor. But even as a 28-year-old man, I got confused a little later on when you have to find Magma's secret hideout. But it's nothing running around like an idiot and talking to everyone doesn't fix, or just using a guide to figure it out. Anyways, back to Route 119. The long path does eventually lead north to Four Tree City, and I don't know what it is about this town in particular, but it's so memorable to me. The elevated tree houses, the music, it creates such an excellent atmosphere. And it's towns like this that make Pokemon worlds feel so alive to me. I can't help but want to talk to everyone and visit every house I can. And that's something I kind of don't do in some of the newer titles, because it just doesn't feel worth it. I also had a huge crush on Winona. I know most people think of water when they think of Gen 3, but I don't know. I think of Tree City a lot. Speaking of water though, let's address the most common complaint and meme about Gen 3/Hoenn, and that's too much water. Going back to this game with fresh eyes, I was eager to see how much of an issue this really is. It's been probably almost a decade, so I was curious to see what I thought about all the water, and my verdict is, I don't actually care that much. I like surfing, and diving is a total vibe, and there's a lot of water, but I mean, other games have a lot of land for you damn Team Magma faithfuls out there. If encounters in the water really are bugging you that much, don't forget to use your repels. I used to be so stingy on these and not spending my money, but this time through I was spraying myself everywhere, trying to keep the tentacle away. Also, has anyone ever wondered what a repel smells like? I imagine it's a chemical mix similar to Axe body spray, that's why it repels all of nature, but I could be wrong. The only really annoying thing is all the HMs. I basically had a dedicated Wailord for all my water HM needs, and also unlocking the Reggies, but that's a common issue for a lot of these older Pokemon games. HMs are a bitch, and slavery is the only option here. I am sorry, Ninkata, but you came around at the perfect time and you knew Cut and Flash. I had no choice. By this time though, there isn't really much to do except clean up the game's gyms and head to the endgame. So now we're almost at the end and it's time for the Elite Four and Champion, which are okay. But I swear my Manectric named Elsa sweeps half the Pokemon with Bite and Lightning Bolt / Thunder alone. And Wallace, oh geez, our good old friend Wallace, he is a total joke this time around. Elsa and Lochad, the Ludicolo, kind of slap everyone on this team in one hit. Only Melodic put up a fight, and that's really just kind of stalling the inevitable. I didn't even have to cash in on my insurance policy of having a level 70 Rayquaza on the back burner. And here's maybe another little rant, but I get it, these games are for kids, but I remember struggling with Steven as a kid, and even in my last playthrough, he gave me several of those moments over the years where I barely squeaked by with one Pokemon in the red. And I think it's just so cool to have this final capstone battle with a badass champion at the very end of your journey. And I personally do not like it when these battles are easy. I should just not be able to one-shot the majority of the champion's team with one Pokemon and frankly, one move, which was Thunderbolt. It pretty much wrecked his almost entire team. And that's just kind of not fun. And I think even a kid is going to understand that at this point in the game, something like Thunderbolt or like electric type moves are going to destroy. So I think even kids who are young are going to absolutely destroy Wallace, and it's just kind of a shame on this otherwise great game. But regardless of that, there are some other really cool battles throughout the game, like trying to capture Rayquaza. There's some other cool battles throughout the game, like trying to capture Rayquaza early and just giving up and using the Master Ball, or the double battle with Steven in Moss Deep Space Center. But Wallace he's just not one of those highlights, really. And overall, though, the challenge in this game isn't very difficult for someone who knows what's going on, but it's definitely not as easy as some of the newer games. And I think my main takeaway, though, is I still had just a lot of fun playing this game again. And sure, it didn't rack my brain, but it's not like I was one-shotting trainers all the time and was bored. Every once in a while, there was a scenario of trainers that would come in that did push me quite a bit. Though I would consider playing an Emerald ROM hack if you want a little bit more of a challenge, but the same story. Now, once your journey ends, there's still actually quite a bit to do, like tackling the Reggies, hunting for Latios and Latias, and of course the Battle Frontier, which is the new introduction to Pokemon Emerald. And I'll just say it right now, frankly, I did not do that much of that this time around. I have in the past, the last time I played Pokemon Emerald, and I know that you can easily spend another 100 or so hours playing through this game's post-game. But this time I really was more looking for just playing the main story itself, and I know how good that post game can be, and I really don't want this whole video to take a whole nother year for me to play that entire post game. So maybe I'll do something later on if I want to talk a little bit about it more, if I do continue playing it more. But yeah, it's a great post game for Pokemon, and it kind of did set a standard for what I think was going forward. But Even saying that right now, I just was reminded of the Sevi Isles right in my head, and I was like, oh damn, that was so good. Anyways, well, that's about it for this journey. If you like this video, like, subscribe, I accept bribes. I really love this game, especially what the story is trying to teach, and it holds up so well in my opinion. And I will no longer keep it ostracized from the other two, Ruby and Sapphire, as much when discussing the greatness that is Generation 3. But I will leave you all with one question I did have. Do the people of Sootopolis have to dive every time they want to leave the city, or do they fly? Do they have to have a Pokemon that knows fly when they're born? Like, how do they leave the town? Are they just trapped in there? Do they have a Pokemon that knows HMs right away when they're like 3 or something? I need answers. Okay, bye.